In the previous video, I talked about booleans and how we can use them to express terms as being true or false. In this video, let me talk about our if statements. If statements allow us to execute code when certain statements are true or when certain statements are false. For example, we can say number is equal to 0, and we can say if number is less than 0 and print number is negative. So let me save this. So when I save this and run, I'm going to run python if statements.py, and this is not going to print anything because the number is equal to 0. So let's say if our number was, let me say negative 4. So let me print this. So if we printed this, it will print that the number is negative. Now let's write another if statement. Let's say if our number is greater than 0, and let's say we print that the number is positive. So when I save this and run, so if I run python if statements.py, so we're going to see that the number is going to be positive for the second case. Now what if we made a mistake? This number is, if we say that if the number is greater than 0, then we say the number is positive. So if I print this, it's going to print the number is negative because the number is negative. Now, what if the number is greater than, let's say the number is 67? When you save this, we expect that the second if statement is the one that's going to run because the number is positive. So if I run this, we're going to see that our number is going to be positive. Now you realize we are writing a lot of if statements. Now we can also be able to write the else if statement, or what we call the elif in Python. So instead of writing if number is equal to 0, if number is this, or if number is that, I can come and just say elif. I'm going to come here and say elif number is greater than 0. So we can print number is positive. So when I run this, I'm going to say number is positive because the number is positive. Now let's assume we want to write a function that's going to evaluate any number that we may pass through it as an argument and then return whether it's positive or negative. So let me write this in a function. So let me first declare my function. So let me remove the number. Then say def check number. So I'll pass in a number and I'm going to pass in this code. So I'm just going to indent it and make it be part of our function. So after doing this, and what I'm going to do is to check a variety of numbers. So I'm going to check number, let's say 23. Also going to check number, and let's say negative 11. And let me say check number. So I'm going to check another number, let's say 100. So if I save this, I'm going to go to the terminal and run. So we're going to see that the first number is going to be positive, the next number is going to be negative, and the next number is going to be positive. Now, we can also compare very many statements. For example, I can write a function that can check whether a number is greater than another number, or when provided with other numbers, I can be able to compare and check whether the number is the largest. Let's write a function that does that. I'm going to first comment this function, and I'm going to write another function. I'm going to say def return max. So this is going to return our max number. If I pass in number 1 and number 2, then I can say that if number 1 is greater than number 2, then we can just return. So I'll just return what is greater. So I can return number 1. Now, when we have an else statement is when the condition is not true. So for the first case we are evaluating our code, we would like to return if number 1 is greater than number 2, we want to return number 1. And for the second case, if it's not the case, we want to use the else statement. So let's use the else statement. So I'm going to say else, then we shall have to return number 2. And what this means is this function is going to evaluate two numbers, number 1 and number 2. If number 1 is greater than number 2, it will return number 1. And if number 2 is greater than number 1, it's going to return number 2. So let's check this on a variety of numbers. So I'll say return max. So then I say 23, 44. And I also return max on 34, 45. So if I return max on, let's say, 54 and 45, and also return max 70 and 12. So I'm going to save this and run it. So I'm going to come to the terminal and run python if statements.py. So this is returning, and all we need is to print this. So I'm going to print this. So I'm going to come and print, also do the same thing here. Going to print. So after this, I'm going to run this again, and when you print this, we see that for the first case, it's returning 44. This is because 44 is greater than 23. For the second case, it's returning 45 because 45 is greater than 34. For the third case, it's returning 54 because it's greater than 45. And for the fourth case, we're seeing that it's returning 70 because it's greater than 12. So we've been able to see that functions can help us to evaluate if a statement is true. Now, what if we have a program that we need to run that's going to evaluate two statements? So this is where the Boolean logic comes in. So let me comment this. So we can write a simple function that can evaluate, let's say, a grading. So we can say def return grading, and we pass in a parameter which is a mark. So let's say we have a mark. So when we have this mark, we want to see whether when it falls in this range, we can give a certain mark. So let's try doing that. So we can say if mark is, let's say, so we can write the first condition, and you can say that if the mark is greater than 90, then we can say the grading is going to be, let's say, an A, and we can return the grading. Now for B, for that second condition, we can say that else if the mark the mark is greater than, let's say, 85, and the mark is less than 90. So we can say the mark is less than 90. So we can say greater than or equal to 85 and less than 90. Then we can say that the grading in this case is going to be a B. Then we can return the grading. Let's try the same thing. So I'll say if, and let's say the mark is greater than or equal to 80, and the mark is less than 85. Then you can say that our grading is going to be a C, and we'll return grading. So if I'll then write an else statement. So I'll write else, and we say that the grading is going to be a D, just for this example. Then I return the grading. So let's evaluate our code. So let me first put the terminal down. So what our code is doing is to evaluate these conditions. So for the first case, we are checking if the mark is greater than 90, we're giving a grade of A. And if the mark is greater than 85, greater than or equal to 85 and less than 90, then we give a B. Greater than or equal to 80 and less than 85, we give a C. And for the rest of the marks, we give a grading that is over D. So let's try running this on many sample marks. So we're going to say print, because this is just returning. So we're going to print return grading, let's say for 100. I'm also going to print return grading for, let's say, 80. And we're also going to print return grading for, let's say, 55. And we're going to print return grading, let's say, 75. We're going to also print return grading for, let's say, 33. So when I save this and run, I'm going to first clear out my terminal with Ctrl and L, then run the if statements. So this is going to grade depending on the conditions I set. So 100 is going to give uh, 100 is going to give an A, a C, a D, and a D, and a D, just like we specified.